Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk ETC. I have Piskel or Anthony and Kevin Lord from IOHK, and they're going to get us up to date on the latest ETC news. So welcome, both of you guys.
Hey, Christian. Thanks for having me.
What's up, Christian?
Hey. So, Kevin, I know you've put together a lot of items to enlighten us about. So why don't you go ahead and jump right into it? Everybody already knows who you both are, and you're important members of the community. So yeah, let's. What do you got for us?
Yeah, so why don't we start out with the Atlantis or the upcoming Atlantis hard fork? So that was originally a hard fork to include, I believe, the Spurious Dragon and the Byzantium upgrades from Ethereum. So that would make it more compatible with Ethereum. And yeah, that's been proposed for a few months now. And just recently, it was proposed by ETC Labs to move up the original deployment date from, I believe, August 1st to a date in July. Almost a month, right? Wasn't it, Anthony?
Yeah, it was July 1st, I think, actually.
Yeah, so that was proposed through a blog post. It had to use the ECIP process. So that's one thing I think would be great to discuss would be the ECIP process and why it's so important to use it. Essentially, it gives everybody an equal playing field. It brings everybody down to the same court. You don't have people playing by different rules. You don't have changes being implemented that maybe aren't being reviewed properly. That's one of the main reasons for having the ECIP process. Essentially, it's the same as the Bitcoin improvement proposal process, the Ethereum improvement proposal process also. So it's very important to respect that process because honestly, it's one of the limited forms of governance that ETC has. So, I mean, it's incredibly important to follow that standardized process.
And so anybody could create an Ethereum Classic Improvement Proposal, ECIP by the acronym, and then there's a procedure for everybody to view it, comment on it, and so it's just a nice way for all the parties to communicate. Right.
Yeah, and roughly determine if everybody wants to implement it and if they're going to, actually download and run whatever code it is that is changing some property of the network. Or, just in general, writing a spec really is what the ECIP process is all about. But yeah, it's the only way that we have to keep everybody up to date because, as Kevin mentioned, it's the only place where everybody can have a voice and everybody can make their comments or concerns heard. So they can either write an ECIP, they can post a comment on a specific ECIP, they can join the various calls in order to discuss them. Some are, on Discord, for example. And yeah, it's a process that's worked just fine for the past 3 years now, almost.
Okay.
Yeah, the one thing I really like about this process is that it allows anybody who wants to be involved to be involved and then have anybody else externally look at what they want, look at what they propose, look at what changes they want to be made, or, look at the reasoning behind those statements or whatever it was. So I think it's incredibly important to follow this process because if you don't follow this process, there's a big chance that there's going to be segments that don't hear your voice because you're using a blog post or you're using Twitter. This is the standardized process that has been around since day zero of ETC, and it's been successful. It's been quite successful, actually. We've gone through how many hard forks, Anthony? I think it's just those two main, the difficulty bomb and the monetary policy. But I think there were some smaller ones.
Yeah, no, the one that I think is really a good test case or a good historical example to study is the monetary policy one. Mm-hmm. And that one, I remember it followed the ECIP process. and they were very open about and very slow and methodical, even to the point where some people were even getting annoyed because they were so transparent and open and careful about broadcasting all their intentions. But everybody knew it was coming. There was no surprises. And
people were like, just do it already.
Yeah, exactly.
Pull the trigger already.
Yeah. I would rather over communicate than under communicate.
Oh, definitely.
But, yeah, going back to what's happened now with the upcoming ECIP 1054, also known as Atlantis hard fork, is, as Kevin mentioned, on July 1st, ETC Labs had kind of planned to have the hard fork to launch it ahead of time. Very few people actually knew about this. Essentially, just whoever they were in contact with were aware of it. Nobody who was actually participating in the ECIP process had any idea about any of this until there was this blog post from ETC Labs, and then that led to a couple calls over the past few weeks and a lot of discussion, which eventually led to the agreement that the date for the hard fork is TBD. Essentially, the developers will try and make sure that the hard fork is ready for August 1st. And if they're able to do that and there's enough lead time to make sure everybody updates and follows the same chain and everybody's on board, then we would do that. And if not, then it would stick to the original date of around September 15th. And that's process is great because everybody can clearly see these dates and everybody can clearly understand what may happen and when. Whereas the other way, nobody had any clue that this was going to happen. And it's really unfortunate that ETC Labs just doesn't seem that interested in following the ECIP process much. And also so the whole thing is when it comes down to ideology about this type of stuff is you have two different camps. You have one camp that says, if we can't come to an agreement, then, that's fine. We're going to hard fork the network and make updates at whatever cost. And the other side says, if we can't come to an agreement, then that's a no-go. A lot of people try and put democracy onto these cryptocurrency networks, but democracy is not a good fit for them, particularly a majority rules democracy. This actually needs much, much higher consensus than majority rules. This is not achieve 51% consensus and everybody else has to follow along. This is achieve 95% consensus and the remaining 5%, it doesn't matter.
Right. No, that's a good point, because if we just did everything by majority rules and you have a large minority, then you're going to get significant communities in hard forks.
Yeah, you might get something called Ethereum Classic.
Ethereum Classic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if somebody wants to do a hard fork ahead of time, they're welcome to do it, and they can call it by a different name, but it would not be Ethereum Classic.
Right.
So, I would argue that without the ECIP process, we really don't have Ethereum Classic. Ethereum Classic has a lot of the same philosophies as Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has their own governance. The Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. That's exactly what we have over here with ETC. So I would argue without that, we don't have ETC. We just have another blockchain project controlled by one person.
Right. So we all have to do our part to make sure it stays decentralized and has all those properties we know and love. Exactly.
I think this ECIP process benefits the ecosystem in a lot of ways. But I also think getting on GitHub for a lot of end users might be intimidating. I know for me at the very beginning it was. I didn't even want to get on GitHub. I was like scared I was going to break something.
Right.
So, I can understand people having that barrier, but it just comes to a point where it's like, are you intentionally not learning about the ECIP process or learning how to use it? It's an odd position to be in for sure.
Yeah, and most of ETC Labs knows how to use GitHub and Git and a lot of other software a lot better than most of us.
Well, didn't they take over the old Ethereum project repository in December?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Forgot about that.
Well, hopefully they'll realize the value in doing it, using the ECIP process, that it doesn't just benefit the community, but it also benefits them in the long term more.
Unfortunately, I don't think that has been realized at all, which, yeah.
That's the part that gets me the most, is there would be so much more respect and so much more. Okay, so there would be a lot more respect going their way, but they would have a lot more influence if they had just followed the process since day one. That's my opinion.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's something that just kind of earned over time,
Right.
And there was a lot of talks about lack of respect or, lack of this, lack of that. And honestly, that doesn't really matter. None of that matters. It doesn't matter if I respect Anthony. It doesn't matter if Anthony respects me. What matters is the network. The network needs to be, in my opinion, the first, needs to be number one. It can't be the backseat to your emotions or to, you don't feel like you're respected enough. So you're going to, go a different route, but you're still going to want to maintain control over, your network or whatever it is. And, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah. And the ECIP process needs to be followed. I mean, in a recent call, objected to EIP 170, but then I realized that I wasn't properly following the ECIP process, so I just stopped my objections, and I didn't want to push that matter any further. People need to do that. They need to follow the ECIP process. That is what it's there for. I mean, it's really hard, too, to be referencing an ECIP that's made up of the upgrades you want and then to ignore that very same process that you've been referencing everywhere for what it is that you want. You want that change that's in that process. And, I mean, it's really just unfortunate, too, because it's being run like it's an attempt to just run ETC like it's a regular business. It's not power or control for power or control's sake. It's just the assumption that they have it. And they don't realize that this network is really, really decentralized and intentionally hard to coordinate because it stops this rather risk-taking or authoritative position.
Right. If I could just share one related story this reminds me of. So I studying some of the history of the Linux kernel development process. There's been some flame wars where somebody will want to get a big block of code submitted to the Linux kernel, and they don't want to go through the process of having the other kernel developers peer review it, and they just think, well, I'm a smart guy, it's good enough, let's just move on. And apparently, from what I'm told, the pattern is that when you go through that review process, it helps immensely. No one person, no one group can see all the potential issues. And so a lot of times people don't want to go through that process, but the kernel developers know that by doing that, that massive peer review and slowing things down, that helps avoid the Linux kernel incorporating some major negative issues.
Yeah, and the process helps too, not in just achieving proper code and proper awareness, but the willingness to go through the process means that you're willing to cooperate with everybody else who's involved. Not
necessarily, and that's true. And you don't necessarily need to like the other person. You don't even necessarily need to like the company. You don't need to have any emotions towards anybody, and you could still get the technology you want, or still judge people based on what they're proposing, not who they are and what they're doing or whatever, but based on what's in the proposal. We haven't seen reasoning for the accelerated date from ETC Labs, we've only heard that, you know, exchanges and miners are okay with it. So yeah, let's go through with it. But one, it wasn't proposed, that the change wasn't proposed through the ECIP process. It was subverted. And then two, we have no reasoning for it. It's simply, yeah, we want it, so let's do it. But but where's the benefit to the network? How does the network benefit from a potential split? How does the network benefit from potential fracturing? How does the network benefit from potential infighting? You know, it's absolutely toxic.
And the most amazing thing too is the ECIP process has fairly recently become more robust and revamped, mostly on the part of Donald McIntyre and ETC Labs working together to try and, you know, find a happy medium. But yeah, I don't know. I think that everybody who everybody who's tried to stick to these processes and tried to stick to this type of, you know, for lack of a better word, this type of governance, they've compromised enough. But yeah, it's a shame that process was revamped so substantially to make some concessions, and then now the schedule for Atlantis has been moved in order to make concessions too, you know, under best efforts, because software is hard. And it's just quite a shame that that the compromising keeps coming one way. The compromising keeps coming from one set of ideals or beliefs about how to govern this network, and it doesn't come from the other side. The other side has to compromise. ETC Labs has to compromise after they've already made, you know, demands that are outside of what everybody else has previously agreed to. It's just, it's bizarre, and it's unfortunate. And it's
defeating. It's so defeating. Self-defeating.
Well, it's not defeating. I mean, well, it'll defeat their purposes and their intentions, which is a shame, because there's so much of this seems so unnecessary.
Exactly. And a lot of it would be avoided if it was just through the ECIP process. We wouldn't have this other noise. We wouldn't have these Twitter wars going on. We wouldn't have this back and forth issue, and all these claims of all these excuses, quite honestly, about not being able to communicate correctly, or not being able to, you know, use the ECIP process, or whatever excuse it is. It seems like the compromises do only go one way. And
they should stop. There shouldn't be compromises one way.
Not at all. There should not be compromises at all, in my opinion, unless it's through the ECIP process.
Yeah.
That compromise to move the date forward, but in the scope that the community pushed back on, in my opinion, that, for a lack of a better word, is not valid, because it wasn't proposed through the ECIP process. It was proposed directly through the word of mouth from them. And it's a shame. It's definitely a shame, because without the ECIP process, we wouldn't be ETC. It's definitely a shame.
Yeah. Why don't we move on, and why don't we end this part of our discussion by just mentioning that we appreciate ETC Labs, and they bring a lot of funding for developers, and they've done a lot of great work, and we just hope that they'll listen to the show.
No.
And
that's
realize
what kills me that they're really great. They have a lot of good intentions for the ecosystem. They have a lot of quite honestly good devs on their team. They have a lot of good marketing and good management. They have a great staff, but follow the process. You know, like, this process has been around from day zero. Why aren't you following it? Why are you trying to push your changes arbitrarily? Like, it just does not make sense, because they have so much to offer. And that's what kills me, is that they have so much to offer, and they could be such a star in this ecosystem, but they're choosing to strong arm, and they're choosing to do things difficultly. It's very, very frustrating. Very frustrating.
I understand.
you could see the potential. The potential for them to do great things in this ecosystem is insane.
Right.
But they're completely undoing all that with these actions.
Yeah.
It's a shame, but they are great. They do have an absolutely outstanding team. Not only the dev team, but C Labs team, Liz and everybody. They're all great. It's such a weird situation because you know these people and you think they're great and you know all of this, but on the other hand, they're doing these unilateral statements and decisions on behalf of the network, and it's like putting them in the middle. It almost seems.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, they are great.
So, all right. So what else do we have?
Did you guys see that? So Binance is going to be starting a new exchange, or I don't know if it's a new exchange or if it's just a new service, but they've apparently kicked off all U.S. residents from their platform, and now they're going to be setting up Binance USA or one of those. And that's going to definitely be interesting to see all these hear about it. And you're going to read about it on Twitter for sure.
Okay.
What do you guys think about that?
So I haven't heard that news. So you're saying Binance is setting up an exchange, but then you said they kicked out all the Americans from it. Did I hear correctly?
A new American exchange.
Oh, they're making a new American exchange. I see. Okay. Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, if people use it and how it compares to the other exchanges, I guess.
Yeah. And aren't they the largest exchange right now around? I think they are.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
At least by volume, they're one of the largest. It depends on whether or not you're including BitMEX and what type of exchanges. But yeah, they one of Binance's biggest strengths, though, is the fact that they have pretty much very little regulation to follow. So the fact that they have to kick off all U.S. Everybody in the U.S. And do a Binance U.S. version, that's going to be a version that has to play by the same rules any U.S.-based exchange does. So they might lose their regulatory advantage there. And I don't actually think that Binance US is going to be any good or any preferable to the rest of them, unless they make trading fees really low.
Yeah,
which
true.
is
It's going to be like Coinbase, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on. So, did you guys hear about Google integrating something with Ethereum onto their cloud platform? I think it was. I know they're doing. Oh no, I'm sorry. They're using BigQuery and this other component. With, I think, Ethereum development.
Oh, yeah, Chainlink.
So previously, it came up previously that they had a BigQuery tool to get data from a blockchain. But is this now an additional tool to help with development of smart contracts or something? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so it looks like this new tool uses BigQuery, and it uses this new tool to provide, I guess, better on-ramps and off-ramps for smart contracts.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly 100% sure if this can be used with, ETC, but I know BigQuery, you can search for anything related to ETC on there. You can do a lot of querying.
All right. So didn't Google also have? Didn't you also have some item related to a change to their algorithm that's affecting traffic, search traffic to cryptography related, cryptocurrency related sites? Do you want to say something about that?
So yeah, it was CCN that put out this first, and they were saying that their traffic had been really reduced, like in the hundreds of percentage points. And that came right after the June 3rd Google Core update. So a large drop in the searches for their site had dropped by like hundreds of percent. So that essentially caused them to close their doors because they can't generate, that kind of revenue to stay open.
Right.
So unfortunately, they're closing down after, I believe, it looks like 6 years of reporting news. CryptoCoin news had to close down. But yeah, it wasn't just cryptocurrency sites that were being affected. It was all different sites. They put out a blog post, and it actually detailed a few other industries that were affected also. I think.
Right. So essentially, Google updates their search algorithm to try to improve it. And what happens is there's often collateral damage that, for whether intentionally or unintentionally, that affects businesses. And so you're saying some crypto sites were the part of the collateral damage.
Yeah, it looks like it was not only crypto sites. It was like dailymail.com.uk. Let's see if there's another popular one. NFL.com was lost 24% of their searches, of their search traffic. You had like Vimeo, also the video website, lose 18% of or 17% of their traffic also. So it was a very apparent that there is a correlation here, but
Right.
obviously correlation is not causation. So did that cause this? We
Right.
really can't say for sure, but we can definitely say that one happened right after the other.
Right.
They do have a graph on here that I'm looking at right now, and as soon as that June core update came out, traffic just plummeted.
Right.
So yeah, how do you think Google could improve on this, or how do you think Google can sort of make this fair?
I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to know their internal discussions of how they decide their search algorithm. I don't know. But I wanted to get back to something else did we say everything we wanted to say about Atlantis? About that improvement proposal? Is there anything else we wanted to add? I just wanted to make sure there was no lingering issues or comments.
We went over the original deployment of Atlantis, the fact that it was months and months on the ECIP, and there was comments going back and forth. Everything was good, and then last Monday there was a blog post from ETC Labs saying that they're living up to date. There was a lot of pushback from the community on that date and on the reasoning of the date and on the fact that that date wasn't proposed through the ECIP process. So then a few days later, there was a community-wide conference call, which was advertised all over the social media channels. The fact that we do have a call coming up to discuss exactly the dates. And then the community compromised with the folks at ETC Labs with a new deployment date somewhere around the middle. But then this week, it was realized that that date is just not fathomable.
Right.
So the developers were pushing for a longer date to have more time to test and to make sure that there is no bugs, because as soon as these clients are released on the mainnet, if there's a consensus bug, if there's any other kind of bug, it's going to hurt the network.
Right.
So it's not going to be good for the network, obviously.
Right. Right. Oh, I know. Yeah. Okay. Sounds like we said everything there was to say about that. I did know one thing related to that whole discussion, that whole topic. So there was an open letter by Donald McIntyre regarding ETC Labs and pointing out the way that they're interacting with the community. I thought that was kind of illuminating. And so I think Donald said that after he had published that open letter, that he got a positive response from ETC Labs. So I hope that leads to long-term improvements in communication. But I thank Donald McIntyre for doing that. Yeah. So
that was a really diplomatic effort for sure. We had a lack of communication at the beginning, and this has sort of opened the door for more communication. And there's nobody saying we don't want to hear from ETC Labs. There's nobody saying we don't want to hear what their reasoning is. We don't want to work with them. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. Because the truth is, the community wants to see what ETC Labs can do. Well, I can't speak for the community, but for myself, I can say, I want to see what ETC Labs can do in this ecosystem. I want to see them, thrive. I want to see them bring what they can to the ecosystem.
Right.
So I think opening this communication is a lot better. They technically don't have a community manager for ETC. So what they do have, though, is Christian Zhu, who is working for the ETC Cooperative. He is technically the community manager.
Okay.
So it's a bit of an odd dynamic between who's actually got the power to influence or the power to post these blog posts or the power to use the Twitter accounts and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to figure out who exactly to communicate with because of those odd dynamics. But since it seems like since this letter was written, there's been a heck of a lot more communication from ETC Labs to the community in the form of Terry Culver coming into the Discord, also Christian Zhu coming into the Discord. For those who don't know, Terry, he's the CEO of ETC Labs, also a CEO of DFG. So it was honestly very reassuring to see him in the Discord and to hear him voice his concerns and his reasons. ETC is incredibly, ETC doesn't care who you are. ETC is a network. So if you want to come in and speak your mind, come in and speak your mind. The door is completely wide open.
Right.
So this communication is a really good step in the right direction, I think.
Good. And then for the last item, didn't you have something about Simple FX?
A few weeks ago, I believe a week ago, they added Monero and Ethereum Classic accounts to their margin trading and to their trading platform. I believe they're actually a really large trading platform. They're one of the first CFD brokers that offered cryptocurrency. So they're pretty large. They have around 200,000 active traders.
What's CFD for the people that don't know?
It's a financial instrument. That's about as detailed as I could tell you.
Okay. All right. So
maybe it's derivatives. I don't know.
Okay.
A quick Google search would tell me.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just more to show that ETC is
slowly spreading and getting supported.
Not even slowly spreading. ETC is completely almost spread. It's in all of the major exchanges. It's already been, by proxy, it's already been declared not a security by the SEC. Woohoo! But yeah, it's already in all the major exchanges. It's on a lot of the end user trading platforms like Robinhood or like Circle Invest. The accounts where you can deposit money and just buy. You're not actually buying the coin, you're just buying a position in the price. And then if it goes up, it goes down, the value of your position changes. So that's actually one way I've been slowly onboarding friends of mine and, relatives and, anybody I can talk to is by using those types of services.
Interesting.
But it's just more for ETC. ETC is already in all the major exchanges. ETC is already in Google BigQuery. It's already in Kaggle. It's, in those data set tools.
And let's not forget Coinbase.
Who can forget about Coinbase?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes.
Coinbase and their 5,000 block confirmations.
Right.
So it is something that we have to deal with, but it's the price of the convenience,
Yes, right.
So you going to say something?
No, I was going to say, yes, I think you've covered a lot of ground and we had a lot of good discussion. Before we close, is there anything else that I forgot to ask or any other last comments you want to make?
So I just want to tell the audience that Anthony had to go take care of a cat-related issue. So that's why he's no longer on the
I'm sure the audience just needed to know that. I'm sure they're just happy to know that Anthony's got annoying cats.
They're wondering, where did Anthony go?
Yes, that's true.
that's what happened to him. But yeah, some notes going forward. Definitely want to encourage anybody. It doesn't matter what level of community, what level of member you are. I'm not even going to say community member. What level member you are in whatever you're doing. If you're experienced, if you're not, if you're technical, if you're not, go to the ECIP repository and learn about the process. Just learn about how we get a rough consensus, or how we get close to a consensus without having formal governance in place. There's no on-chain governance. There's no gimmicks. It's all just this process. That's the only small form of governance ETC has. And I think not to use it would be a complete disrespect, because without an ECIP, we wouldn't be ETC.
Right.
So that's just what I want to leave everybody with.
Very good.
Just learn the ECIP process. It's this important process.
Very eloquently put. Thank you. Your passion for ETC shows. Thanks for.
I do want to remind everybody about the summit that's coming up. We actually sort of slowed down on raising awareness for that. So yeah, I definitely want to remind everybody that there is the ETC Summit coming up in September. And I believe it's September. It's towards the end of the year. But if you want to learn more about it, just go to etcsummit.com and you can learn all about it. I know Bob has some very special speakers lined up. This year is going to be incredibly dynamic as far as the participants go. So it's definitely going to be one to be there for. I'm really excited to go. I might be speaking, but I'm not sure about what yet. But yeah, man, I hope to see you there, Chris. I know you were there in Hong Kong.
Yes, yeah, I'll try to make it. But yep. All right. So why don't we end on that note? So I just want to thank you again, and then thank you to PyScale, to Anthony, even though he's not here with us right now, and we just want to give a shout out to his cats.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, why don't until next time, get best wishes and see you shortly.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.